trying to clarify different ways you could measure polarization. So we have a paper in the Journal of Mathematical Sociology where we lay out 9 different measures of polarization. Here I'm going to give you 3 of the measures. The first one's not one of them. But I'm going to give you 3 of them for the sake of demonstrating the point. So if we're going to measure a group, so say we have a belief histogram. Here's all the people. Their beliefs are jumping around. One thing we might measure about this is how quickly they converge. So if the group converges, how quickly does it take them to converge? And there's 2 different kinds of convergence that we could get. So one, we could get how quickly does it take them to converge on a view? How quickly does it take for everyone to be a believer in guilty or a believer in not guilty? Another question we could ask is how long does it take for them to converge on a set of reasons? So not just everybody believes they're guilty, but everybody believes the person's guilty for the same reasons. Why are we measuring convergence? Well, because if a group converges, there's no polarization, right? Converged groups aren't polarized. Here's some better measures of polarization. So another measure of polarization that we could use is group divergence. So group divergence measures the means of the groups. So group B here is more polarized than society A. So in A, the means are this far apart. In B, they're this far apart. So they're more polarized, right? That's a natural sense of polarization. Here's another sense of polarization, how much consensus there is within the subgroups. So society A, so the axes are not the same here. Same with group divergence. How far, subgroup divergence, how tight-knit the groups are. The groups are more tight-knit with outside input than when they are with pure deliberation. Here's a summary table, which I expect no one to read, but the upshot is this. The upshot is that you only get polarization with coherence-minded agents in this model. And when you have something that, for other groups, makes them less polarized, namely the outside input, it makes coherence-minded agents more polarized. So it seems like coherence-minded itself is what's causing the polarization. Okay, so what's going on so far? So I've given you a model. In the model, we've got these coherence-minded agents. I've argued that the coherence-minded agents, in fact, will polarize, given some parameters that I have. take on board the new reason you got, you don't, ask yourself, should I take it on board based on whatever? Nope, you take any new reason on board, and then in light of all the reasons that you have that go over, including this one that goes over your memory limit, you decide what to believe, and then you forget a reason. Right, so you're never treating incoming evidence in any kind of biased way. It doesn't seem like you're treating any of your evidence in a biased way. I'm happy to try to fix it. Okay, so this is not an objection to coherence-mindedness. So what are some arguments for coherence-mindedness? One way to argue for coherence-mindedness is just to say, look, having a coherent belief state, that seems like a good thing. And if you buy that, then the argument to coherence-mindedness isn't very hard, because coherence-mindedness gets you to have a coherent belief state. If you really like that line of argument, you'll probably notice this problem. That line of argument should point you towards forgetting the strongest reason that goes against you, not the weakest reason that goes against you. And that strikes me as overly biased. My thought, what I actually believe, is that coherence-mindedness is a rational strategy, but there's lots of rational constraints, so you're required to respect your evidence too. So those two things together require you to forget the weakest thing on the other side. If you don't buy that, and you really love coherence, and you really want to go, no, it's all about coherence, well then, fine, have a view called super coherence-mindedness, where you forget the strongest thing on your side. Then you're going to get more polarization. That's pretty easy to prove. So the argument will go through too, if you like that view. Here's another argument for coherence-mindedness. Here's a view. I call this view rational dogmatism. If you rationally believe P, so if you believe that you left your keys at home for good reason, and you get some new evidence that not P, your son says, oh, I saw your keys in your office. Why are we not? I saw your keys in your office. So you get some new evidence that not P. Then you have to do one of the two following things. You either have to think that that new evidence is misleading, or you have to give up your original belief. You can do both, but you have to do one or the other. So you either have to think, nope, my son is lying to me, or whatever, or he was confused, those weren't my keys, those were my colleague's keys, or you have to stop believing that your keys are at home. Yeah, okay. So from that, we can get coherence-mindedness. How does that go? The argument goes like this. Rationality requires us to view opposing evidence as misleading. So opposing evidence meaning evidence that goes against what you believe. So if you have to give it a belief, it's opposing evidence, so it's misleading. Misleading evidence is bad evidence. You shouldn't base your belief on bad evidence. So you shouldn't hold on to bad evidence over good evidence when you're forced to make a choice. So if we have to forget something, we should forget opposing evidence. Again, like on the last slide, you might think that this says, well, look, then we should forget the strongest reason on the opposite side. And again, yeah, you'll get polarization if you do that too. I'm inclined to think that's not right, because I think there's many constraints of rationality, but the argument will work if you think that. Okay, so those are two arguments to think that coherence-mindedness is a rational way to manage your memory. Here are some objections that need to be dealt with. So one is the objection I brought up earlier, that this model is just way too simple. So the model structure is like this. Agents have reasons. Reasons are just pro-cons for guilty, not guilty, right? They're a supported strength, they're guilty, not guilty, and then supported content, and then a strength. And then discussion is just exchanging of these reasons. And the problem, recall, is that real group deliberation, real group discussions allow us to do these additive things where I can say something and you can say something. Those can collectively be worth more than either one, than just the addition of the two. P by itself doesn't support Q. If P then Q doesn't support Q. But the two together support Q. So then the response, so I gave you some responses earlier. Better responses, here's a new model. So in the new model, agents have propositions. And some sets of propositions are arguments. And arguments are going to have a conclusion and a strength. So the argument is going to have a conclusion, guilty or not guilty, and then it's going to have a strength at which that conclusion is. And then discussion in this new model is going to occur by exchanging propositions, not by exchanging arguments. So here was the old model, it was just A, and it supported guilty with some strength. In the new model, not much of a variation, we have some collection of propositions, and those collectively in this new model, different agents can contribute different parts to the discussion. So I can say A, and Anita can say C, and Marcella can say F, and then can collectively conclude guilty with strength. Another virtue that this model has is that we can have the same premises might say, look, very small number of strong reasons. That's you might say, look, that doesn't mirror our real discussions at all, and our real discussion at all. There's really good reasons to be a pro-choice person. There's really good reasons to be an anti-choice person. So maybe the distribution looks like that, not like that. But again, this is a feature, not a bug. If the distribution of reasons looks like this, then we should expect it to be easier to get polarization, because you'll have the people who have these reasons and the people who have these reasons. So this is going to be the distribution of reasons where it should be hardest to get polarization. So the fact that we do get polarization there makes it a better argument. I mean, if you run this, you also do get polarization. Check that to make sure the work is something weird going on. Okay, so mini recap. So I gave you a new model of group deliberation. I showed that in this model, some of the agents, the coherence-minded agents, polarize. I tried to convince you that coherence-mindedness is a rational strategy for managing your memory, so then I can conclude that polarization can occur from rational updating of shared evidence. Cool. All right, so a couple more minutes before I wrap up, and we can have some questions. So, recall the new model. So in the new model, agents remember propositions, not reasons anymore, and then some collections of propositions or arguments, and those arguments support strengths, support some content with some strength. And then discussion occurs by exchanging propositions. So again, the idea is something like this. Something that becomes much more natural to ask when you're looking at this model is, how should agents decide which reasons to share? So we tell people how to share information all the time. If you see an abandoned briefcase on the subway, you're supposed to say something, right? You're not supposed to just speak at random. Okay, so in the old model, the agents just, we had a random agent, they just said something at random. But we might model where that doesn't happen. If we look at social psychology, there's lots of research on how people decide what to share. So the hidden profile paradigm is a large research area where the main kind of thread is that people in group discussions tend to not bring out the information they have that hasn't been shared already. People tend to focus on information that's already out there, which seems like a really bad thing. And then if you look at popular literature and some academic literature, you'll see lots and lots of advice about how to run better group discussions. So here's a fairly recent book by Cass Sunstein and Reed Hastie or Hastie about Hastie about how to run better group discussions. And there's lots of advice in here about like, oh, should you have a devil's advocate or should you have a red team, things like that. So what are some ways that we might have agents share? So thinking just really simply, so we could have agents share at random. We already had that in the first model. Another thing that agents could do is they could share influentially. What that would mean is they look at everything that's been said already in the discussion and they say, what piece of information do I have that would most influence this discussion? That would just add the most information. That would allow us to conclude more, whatever that is. Another way they could do it is they could share biasly. So they could say, I'm not going to contribute the thing that helps, that gives us the most amount of information. I'm going to contribute the thing that helps pull the group discussion in my direction, whatever my direction happens to be. Influential and biased are both ways of implementing this idea that if you have something to share, you should share it. They make a difference. So the top row there, people share random. The middle row, people sharing individually, and the bottom row, people sharing biasly. What are we measuring here? What we're measuring is the percentage of agents that are truthfully here, particularly with data supported by actually the argument. So the argument totally fine. You can just hear the percent of agents who have the true belief as the percent of agents who have the belief that's the belief they would have if they had all the reasons that are havable. Okay, so if we look at the percent of agents who have all the reasons, who have the belief that they would have if they had all the if we look at that, what we see is that influential agents do a much better job of getting everyone on board with the truth than either random agents or biased agents. Perhaps the surprising result here is that biased agents actually do worse than random. So that seems bad. So what does this do? Well, this vindicates this idea that it's worthwhile discussing how we should share things. So the Sunstein, Haseby book, maybe that's a good thing we should be doing. We should be looking at these different ways of sharing information. But how much does sharing information matter? Well, that was for unlimited agents. What if we look at agents who have random memory? Well, if we look at agents who have random memory, how much difference the different sharing methods makes is a lot smaller. Not only is it a lot smaller, but here, bias sharing actually does better than either of the other two sharing methods. What about agents who are weight-minded? Well, again, here, how much difference is made by the sharing methods is much smaller than it was for unlimited agents. And same pattern applies for coherence-minded agents. The amount of difference made by sharing methods is not that much compared to unlimited agents. So if you look, so we have 384,000 samples of this, and if you look at all the data across all the parameters, you see that in general there is a consistent pattern here. With p-values like this, with the data size we have, I don't actually consider this significant, but whatever. Okay, so there's a difference between these different sharing methods. In general, bias sharing actually does better than influential sharing, which does better than random sharing, which is not the pattern that you get with the unlimited agents. Again, these p-values are, in my mind, questionable. What about the forgetting methods? Well, it turns out the forgetting methods actually make a much bigger difference to the percent of agents who have the true belief than do the sharing methods. So here the p-values are significant in what I think of as an intuitive sense. So here, weight-minded agents do significantly better than either one of the other methods. And in average, that's by about 3%. 3 percentage points. 3% of the groups. 3% of the group is on the truth. 3% more on the truth. And then both of those methods do better than random. Coherence-minded does about 7.5% better, and then weight-minded does about 10.6% better. All right, so it seems like forgetting matters a lot. So maybe we should be thinking about forgetting. Well, another way to look at this is to see how much of the variance is explained by forgetting rather than the sharing methods. So if we do that and we look at just the number of agents with true beliefs after we've run a bunch of steps of the model, we see that forgetting explains 86 times the variance that's explained by the sharing methods. So it seems like forgetting is a much, much better predictor of how the group's going to do than the sharing. If we look at the number of agents who have the true belief after just 10 steps, that's not what we get. Sharing actually explains 3 times more of the variance at that stage than forgetting does. But that's going to be the exception on this pretty long list. So if we ask maybe, does the group belief stop evolving before 1,000 steps? Does that ever happen? In answering that question, forgetting explains roughly 82 times the variance explained by sharing methods. If we ask how quickly it stops evolving, given that it stops, again, forgetting explains a lot more of the variance. If we ask, does the group converge before 1,000 steps, so not just stop, but everybody agree on something, forgetting explains 50% more of the variance. If we ask how quickly the group converged, given that it converged, forgetting explains about just as much of the variance as the sharing. And if we ask the question whether or not it converged on the truth, given that the group converged, forgetting explains 2.4 times the variance than does sharing. So why does this all matter? Well, or why does forgetting matter? Well, here's a kind of cartoon picture of group deliberation that you could have in your head. Group deliberation, you might think, is something like this. It's the dissemination and social processing of information. So then why does sharing matter? Well, sharing matters because at the beginning of the day, different agents have different pieces of information. So sharing spreads around the information so that different agents can process the information. But in this picture, forgetting also should obviously matter because forgetting is what controls whether or not the information stays in the group. If the information is forgotten, then it can't be shared and processed. Right? So that's why forgetting and sharing both matter. You might say, look, this is all very interesting. You've now shown me that if we're trying to predict group performance, then we should, see how they forget. That might be relevant. But look, what we really care about is getting better group outcomes. And we can tell people how to share information, but forgetting is not the sort of thing that we control, right? It just happens. You can't control how you forget. That strikes me as wrong, though. So we do control whether or not we forget things. We train ourselves to write certain things down rather than others. We manage our focus. If I always forget my partner's friends' names, then, I can train myself next time I meet the friend. Your name's Cecilia? Cecilia. Okay, So we can do that. We can have mnemonics. We teach kids these sorts of things. We can make conceptual connections between things. That's ways of remembering. So how should we optimize group discussion? Well, should we do should we respond? Should we have devil's advocate? How should we format jury instructions? These are all really good questions about how to share information. But what I think one of the upshots of this discussion should be is that maybe we should also be thinking about instructions and techniques for managing our memory. All right, so then here's the actual recap. I gave you a new model of group deliberation in which agents exchange reasons for their belief. I argued that there's a rational way that agents can manage their memory in that model. When agents use the rational way of managing their memory, you get polarized groups. And then I discussed this newer model, which is an extension of the original model. And then in the newer model, how agents forget seems to make a really big difference. Yeah, that's the talk. So how should we do questions? Okay. I can help you with that. Yeah, so that tricks me as a distinctly philosophical question. So I take it a really big question among epistemologists and philosophers more generally, and people outside of philosophy, is what is a rational belief? And so here I wasn't trying to start with a theory of rational belief. I'm open to lots of them. Here I was trying to start with some intuitions about what's more or less rational. So what did I require? What was absolutely necessary for my argument to get this going? One thing I did require is that the rational belief is the belief that stands in the